All right. My name is Sally McCabe, and I'm Associate Director of Community Education at the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. Today is August 4th, 2022, and we are interviewing gardeners from the very long-standing and noble Awbury Arboretum Community Garden. The reason I'm excited about this is because I started working with community gardens with the Penn State Urban Garden Program back in 1977, and this was the garden they brought me to walk me around to see if I had what it took to be a garden assistant with Penn State. And so I remember it very fondly because I got the job. So today we have a really good representation of people who are involved with the garden now and who have been involved with the garden from the very beginning. So what I'd like to do is do a little bit of a round table and have everybody state their name and how long they've been involved with the garden and what their role is now with the garden.
My name is Mrs. Lucille Reasoner. We've been Ardleigh Street residents since 1973, which is located directly across the street from the community garden. We did not participate in the gardening until the second year that the garden had been started, which would have been 1975, but we have been steady gardeners ever since. And at one point, I was recording secretary for a while, but I had to give it up because of my work. But I still garden there with my husband, Richard.
Oh yeah, and I'm Richard Reasoner, Lucille's husband, and as she said, we've been there since we moved up here. We've been gardening like 47 years in there, and we've seen some changes, and they were all for the good. We only had about 20 gardens when we first started. They took all of them out. We were in the backwoods there, and the groundhogs loved us. Because you couldn't keep anything, and then we finally got back where we are, and even it is getting larger. So we went from, I'll say 20, I don't know how many we have now, but it's many more than 20.
My name is Eldredge Ragsdale. I'm currently the president of the Awbury Community Garden, and we have a great garden of 60 volunteers. 60 gardeners, and generally throughout the year I get about 25 to 30 groups of people volunteering to work in the garden, and that's all through the summer. And basically it's a wonderful job dealing with young folks, especially because they are really in tune to working in the garden. Once you get them started, that's the whole idea, getting them hands in the dirt, and they love it. I can name a lot of different groups that come in there, but groups that come in there from all different parts of the country, and we have no problems. We deal with each other just like family. Once we get there, we have fun. And I think the job is great, and I'm gonna stay there as long as they have me. As long as they have me, and I keep it running and keep it going for the next person to come along.
Okay, my name is Leo Cooper, and I'm a past member of the community garden. I was a past president and secretary of the community garden. Been heavily involved with PHS, and I am acting as the representative to the garden for the oral history program.
So it looks, as we're looking around the room, like you two are the old, not, I won't say oldest, because nobody's older than Rags.
Senior.
You are the senior ranking members of the garden. Can you talk about the very early days and what the garden looked like and how it worked, and then contrast it a little with how it looks now?
The only thing, I think when we started, most of the gardeners were relatively new at it.
Now, you said that you came in, you think, in the second year,
I believe maybe
And-
the second, no later, it was
and
the
that
second,
would be
75.
75, so the
Yeah.
garden would have started around 74.
That's what she
Okay.
calculated, and I think she's
Okay.
right on it. So, but like I said, most of the gardeners, I think, were relatively new at gardening. We had a garden that was way up at my father's house, 40 miles away, and we jumped on this. So when we started, we had maybe 20 gardens, and we used to fill the barrels with the water. We had, I guess, maybe 5 barrels you had to fill up with the water, and that's how we watered our
The
garden.
water came from the hydrant?
It came
on
from
the
the hydrant.
street?
It came from the fire department's hydrant. And me and an old youngie, we used to do that on the weekends and fill them up. So it was, in our what do you call them, cleanup days, we would have a couple of them. And most of the people show up, and they're a little different now. Ragsdale's got a different program. He's got these groups coming in that do a lot of work. I was lucky enough to be there last week, and it is enjoyable. I remember when I did it before, the volunteer groups are, and they come from all over. This group, last group was from Chicago, right?
Whoa.
But the group I had from Minnesota, the one boy was a fisherman. I wanted to take him down to Atlantic City and fish for bluefish or something, because he never caught one. But it's been a joy, and it's a big change from when we first started, because it's so much bigger. I remember we used to come in second all the time, but we changed that, didn't we?
Oh, in the City Gardens contest?
Yeah, we changed that.
Oh,
So who was the president when you joined?
I couldn't possibly. With 45 years, remember?
Okay, all right. I just figured I'd ask. And
Dick Purnell was the first one.
He's the only one I remember, his name.
and what name was that?
Purnell.
Purnell.
Yeah, that's his.
And that was before Nolan.
Yes, yes. And I worked with Purnell as a recording secretary.
Yeah, he was the first when we got there.
Yeah.
so the garden at that point had about 20 people in it, and it was
Yeah,
much smaller, did it?
That's my guess.
That's
I don't
your guess.
think it was
Well-
more than that.
So did people grow mostly food, or were there,
Oh, yeah.
was it flowers and stuff?
No, mostly vegetables.
Mhm.
Yeah. You were supposed to have your little flowers out front, but some people did and some people didn't.
But was it in the same place that it is now, more or less?
It's in the same place. Matter of fact, even though they moved us out for a year, as I told you, we went in the back, they really did it over, and it was at least twice as big. But my garden was basically in the same place. But they took all the dirt out for some reason, and all of that stuff was bulldozed out of there, and I don't know where they took it. And they put dirt down, and we started all over with the new platform.
So, so it started out small, mostly people growing vegetables. When did the master plan happen that changed things and made people move?
That was 98.
So you were already, I'm pointing to Rags, you were already in the thick of it?
No.
No? No? Oh, okay.
So 98 we were told about the master plan. We were moved into where Weaver's Way was in the back. We were moved back there. Trees were cleared, and that's why the groundhogs was upset, because that was their little home until we moved back there. And they redid the garden. It took about a year and a half.
Yeah, I think we were there the next year planting.
Mm-hmm.
We only planted in the back 1 year.
1 year, and then we moved to the front. And the master plan we were given before we moved in the back to kind of give us an idea of what was going to happen, what the expectations of what the garden would look like, and what the expectations of the land in our area was going to look like. And so that's kind of how we have the master plan. Trying to think, there was something else I wanted to ask. And most of the people, when you originally first gardened, most of them were from this basic area.
Pretty close.
Mhm.
They're all, yeah, most of them were very near.
So in the years between these humble beginnings with maybe 20 gardeners growing food, and the master plan that you moved back into in the 90s, can you give me a little bit of a description of how the garden grew or changed, or milestones that happened in there?
Well, I don't remember any raised gardens in the beginning. We didn't have any. We had no raised gardens in the beginning, which was big for some of the elderly participants, and they had 10 raised gardens. And now we have double that. So that was big when they put them in.
So shortly after you guys got involved in '75, Penn State Urban Gardening Program adopted the policy of having a regional representative in
Garden
each of the-
advisor.
A garden advisor, thank you. Actually, we were garden assistants, we weren't even advisors yet. And Terry Mishovic was assigned to your garden.
I do.
Do you remember Terry?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and she was my mentor. She was one of my mentors. I learned so much from her. But she got involved, and I believe that that's when the raised gardens started happening, because Penn State was doing a lot of research into soil and building up soil and worrying about soil contamination of lead.
Well, Penn State really was pretty big with us in the beginning, those
Yeah.
early years. They were right on. Anything you needed, you could go to them and you probably get it.
And but officially this became a demonstration, a Penn State demonstration garden in '76. I mean, officially on the books, and that was when all of the, well, there's a group here from Chicago, can we bring them to your garden? There's a group here from the Netherlands, can we bring them to your garden? And your garden was always...
Were there a lot of visitors? Because I don't remember there being visitors when I
Well,
was.
there's more now than there were, but we used to get 1 or 2 a year.
Okay.
You know, I don't know, we get more than that now.
Because that was why Penn State set up the demonstration gardens, because they were only allowed to give supplies to a certain number of gardens. So they chose them geographically, and this was the one for the area, because it was already such an exemplary garden that it was easy. It was like low-hanging fruit to make
How
this.
come we always came in second then?
Pardon?
How come we always came in second?
I think part of the reason that we came in second, and this I know from being involved with the city garden contest and being involved with the garden, is our classification changed. We went from being part of the larger gardens, where we were competing against Spring Garden,
And Queen Village.
Yeah, and
I mean, really amazing
and
gardens.
we got into not the extra large garden, but the large garden. And so in that category, we were really able to dominate.
Also, when the garden expanded and got even before this master plan happened, the garden at some point went from being just vegetable plots to having the more common areas of the flower gardens around the edges and herb gardens around the.
That was part of the master plan.
And that was
Yeah,
not
but
before that,
not
because
before
at that point it became yet another category, because it became a combination garden, and that's where it
I
does.
didn't know it had all that many. I thought it was just a garden as a garden.
Yeah, so we had the gardens that were kind of, and we were kind of in the center before. Basically, kind of, if you would walk down the center of the garden where we are now, most of the gardens were concentrated in there, and we weren't as far back on this side or as far over on that side.
Right.
We were more so in the middle, and there were just plots. The plots then were maybe, what, about 20?
No, they're 10 by 20.
10 by 20?
10 by
Okay,
20.
10 by 20. And as you went out, there might have been stuff planted on the outside of the fence, because we did have a fence. There might have been stuff planted on the outside of the fence, but prior to the redesign of the garden, is when we got the demonstration flower beds around the outside of the garden where the fence is, and plus the area in the front of each garden at the beginning of the rows, we got the beds.
Now, through all of this, Mr. Ragsdale has not said a single word, because when did you start to get involved with the garden? What years were they?
Correct me if I'm wrong. I started right before you. You was president.
No, I wasn't president. Dilma was president when you started.
Dilma was president.
Dilma was president when you started. So I
Now,
want to say
who is this?
Delmer Gill.
Delmer Gill.
Delmer
Okay.
Gill was president
Right, I forgot.
when he started. And as a matter of fact, if memory serves me correctly, it was you and another gentleman had come into the garden, and you guys were tilling plots for people.
Right.
And that's how he got involved. He was tilling plots, and then he got his own plot. And I would put that around, so it had to be at least 2 to 3 years after we were into our new garden. So I'm talking about maybe 2002, 2003.
2003. Yeah.
So, tell me, Mr. Tillerman.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
What did you think of this garden when you first started coming and tilling? And what made you want to get involved in it and then rocket to the top?
Well, I guess I owe it to my parents, because I'm from Virginia, and that's all we did. We gardened. We grew food. We grew just about everything you could name in the garden. And basically, I learned how to just walk up and down the road and take food to people's houses and trade. And I was about 12 or 13 years old, so I thought that was the way to live. So I did that for a few years, and as I got older, I said, it's time for me to do a little something else besides just walking up and down the road and pushing a wagon. So I decided to go in the military. Oh man, what did I do that for? Went in there and I wound up spending about 20 some years shucking around the world. Okay, come out, retired. Before I retired, I met my wife. She is from Pennsylvania. That's how I got up here. If it wasn't for her, I would have never been up here. Came up here, and this is how it all started. And basically, I wound up with a friend of mine down at the garden. And he was showing me some plots down there and what they were doing down there. And I said, that's interesting. I said, well, I could do the same thing they're doing down there. They're growing everything. Lettuce, tomatoes, cabbage. Oh, beautiful stuff they was growing down there. I said, well, I'm going to get me a plot, just like them. So I wound up getting a plot. And I thought that was the most wonderful thing in the world. I could go home and bring fresh vegetables and put on the table. And that was just my whole summer. That was it. I had a plot down there, a 10 by 20, that I can go down and just plant and weed and go on about my business. I said, wonderful. I did that for a while, and then all of a sudden, I found myself in another situation where they wanted somebody to run the garden. I said, I don't want to run the garden. All the thing I'd like to do is just do what I do, come in here, come in the gate, and put something in the ground and get on out. But whatever happened, I met a few people, and I got encouraged to do a little bit more. So I wound up as the president of the garden at that time. And I think that was pretty good. Because right now I look at myself and I say, wow, the garden has changed quite a bit from the time I started until the time it is now. It's gotten better. and I thought it gotten better. And we won numerous awards. And I said, oh God, it must be great, something great. We're doing something great here. And then the turnover of people that's coming in the garden, the volunteers and people that working in the garden, enhanced the garden a little bit more, and we all got it together. And the garden wound up to be one of the best gardens in the city. So I said, look, let's keep this train rolling. So that's where I'm at right now. Keep the train rolling. And
I would say this, when before he became president, we were having community youth come and volunteer at our garden. These were people that the police department dealt with these youth, and they were having some issues. They weren't really bad, but they had to do community service, and we had them come over to our garden and help. And one of the people that they really gravitated to was Rags. Rags was really able to gather up these young people and instruct them on the days that we were there. And it stood out even in the beginning that he was really good at working with youth in regards to that.
it was fun.
So Leo, tell us about your years as involved with the garden and being the president, and
Well,
how you got out of being the president.
How did I got out of the business? Okay. All right. When I met Naaman was that's my husband. I met Naaman. He was a houseplant grower and a vegetable garden grower. And when I talked to him, when I first met him, he was going up to Willow Grove and gardening. He was driving all the way up to Willow Grove. And then he became a part of the Haynesbury garden for a couple of years. Then his plot got, the building next door fell onto his plot. And so he had always been trying to get into the Awbury Community Garden. And he was able to get into the garden. I want to say it had to be 96. He got into the garden. And I worked with him in his garden the first year, and then I got a garden of my own the next year, which was probably like 97. And then 98 was when they told us they were going to redo the garden. And I think at that point in time, Nolan was the garden president, and Nolan, when Nolan retired from the garden president, Delmer Gill took over as the garden president. And I'm trying to think who was, I can't remember who was the secretary. I'm not sure if it was Sylvia Bay or who was the secretary at that point in time, but whoever the secretary was, that person had to step down, and then I was asked to become the secretary because I'd helped with getting the garden dividers. So they asked me to become secretary. So I was secretary for a while. Delmer was president for a while. Then I became president. And we had garden volunteers then. We also had, we had the SAL students come. SAL students come and volunteer. We had SAL students. It was a summer program that they had for SAL students, and we had 2 garden interns. We had them for a year. I'm trying to think what happened after that. Was a community gardener, still community gardener president for a while. And then when I left as president, I think Ed Ferguson was in charge.
Ferguson was the president. I don't know what.
Yeah, Ferguson was after me.
He was after you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then after him was, I can't think of the Roscoe. Roscoe was president after that. And then Rags became president after Roscoe. Yeah.
Yeah, you remember Roscoe.
Big guy.
No, I don't.
You know?
So somewhere in there, the garden took on a bit more of a responsibility for the community and joined the City Harvest Program?
Okay, so, in regards to I think that Leomar got us involved in, the City Gardens contest.
Yeah.
So that's when our garden was being judged. And then, so when the garden was redesigned, we got way more gardeners. And so there was approximately 61 plots, and we probably had, when the garden was redesigned, we had people from about 5 or 6 different zip codes, 18, 19, 38, 50, and 44. So as far as our community was a bigger community because we had people from so many zip codes. And when they talked about the City Harvest Program, they were only dealing with the Keystone Gardens. And we were wondering why Awbury hadn't been asked to be a part of the City Garden Contest. So
In the City Harvest Program?
City Harvest Program.
Okay.
City Harvest
Quick
Program.
side note, the City Harvest Program is the community gardens tithing to a soup kitchen or food pantry or something like that, picking a place that they could send produce to feed the hungry.
And there were 3 of us who were on the Philadelphia Green Committee from Awbury. It was me.
That's the PHS Philadelphia Green.
The
Okay.
PHS Philadelphia, it was me, it was Sylvia Bay, and it was Harold Wells. And we approached Blaine Bonham, who was in charge of the PG, Philadelphia Green Committee, about Awbury becoming a part of the City Harvest Program. And I believe we became a part of the City Harvest Program maybe 2 years after that.
Is that where you and Jerry were growing all this produce to take to the people?
So what was your, where did your produce go?
Our produce that we grew in the garden, we dropped it off at a recreation center down. And all of it was dropped off there. We had about
To where? To a church?
Well, it started out at the church. It went to the rec center. It's on Shelton.
Shelton Avenue.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
The rec
Yeah.
center is on Shelton Avenue.
I can't think of the name of it. It's not coming to me right now.
We take all our food down and to drop it off. And during the year in, harvest season, we accumulated, I'd say, close to 700 to 800 pounds of
Oh, my.
vegetables.
Exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
my.
And at one year, we had 1,000 pounds of vegetables.
So how did you work that separate from people having their individual plots and growing their own food? How did you decide what kind of, what food got shared?
We had our own plots for the growing of the vegetables.
So we had designated plots for City Harvest.
Oh, yeah.
And we had about 3 of those.
Uh-huh.
And the people, they donated what they couldn't take home to us. And we would take it all together, weigh it on the machine, weigh it on the weigher,
A scale.
on a scale, and took it down to the rec center after we finished. But we had kept everything on notes, and we had to send it down to the city hall
Uh-huh.
to let them, not city hall, to
To PHS.
PHS,
Yeah.
to let them
They
know
keep the records,
how
yeah.
much.
Yeah. So does your garden still participate in that?
No, they stopped that
They did.
because of COVID.
Oh.
The
okay.
COVID.
Does the name Lonnie Young?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, Lonnie Young.
Thank
you.
Lonnie Young Rec Center.
Thank you.
How did you come up with that?
She's good. She's good.
She is.
I did our garden one year when Rick had medical problems. And our garden is adjacent to his garden is picture perfect. Everything's neatly in a row. Me, I put it in the garden out here. And I asked him and Jerry where all the stuff was going. And he told me.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So you just brought up an important thing, COVID. How did COVID change how things operated in the garden?
COVID just changed everything. It shut down the whole thing. I mean, they stopped taking the food. I mean, they cut that out, and that was it. So we had to stop delivering that, and everything that was supposed to be going down to them was going to the gardens. Take it home.
Well, the gardeners were not
Take it to your
objecting. They were
neighbors.
taking good care of it. They weren't
Oh,
wasting
of
it.
course, everything was going to
Yeah.
my neighbors.
So do you expect that will start up again?
I'm not sure. I have no idea what they're going to do with that. They haven't said anything to me about that.
COVID has affected the city gardens judging contest too, because it was digital the last couple of
Yes.
years. They've totally gotten rid of the city garden contest, so that's no longer going to go on. But the last couple of years, people were just sending pictures and they were asked questions, but it wasn't like the judges were coming out like we used to be. Personally, I would think one of the big changes that would make is some of the motivation for getting your garden together was that the judges were coming out. But without the judges coming out, that type of motivation is
Might be that weed in there.
that motivation is, you have to find another source of motivation.
One year I was a judge, and I tell you, going around the city and judging gardens, wonderful. It's a beautiful thing.
There's such
You
a good
see
experience.
See people that takes care of a garden on a block soil, and couldn't imagine how it would look when I went in the gate. I went in there and it was just, wow. Just judging this was almost perfect. I said, look at this. You know, people, it brings people together, brings community together, and it brings some type of spiritual thing into it. I don't know what it does. It really touches me. When I went in, a half 100 gardens in the city, just visiting, just looking. I've been in gardens in the city all over Pennsylvania, and I've just looked at community gardens, and I looked at some and I compared them to our gardens. We stands up along with any garden in the city as one of the top gardens in the city. And there are some great gardens in the city, and I've been in some nice ones too. And I've been in some that wasn't too kosher, but that's what they're trying to do. I mean, people are trying to do their best, and I give that effort to them. And it's a wonderful idea, but I hope they can get back to it, because it brings neighborhoods together, it brings people together, and it just seems like it just enhances the neighborhood and get the neighborhood more involved with one another. All nationalities.
Now, Rick, I wanted to ask you and your wife, when you guys were first members, where did you get your plants from? Did everybody basically kind of grow the same thing? I remember there was an older gentleman who used to come out with you to grow.
Oh, Ernie.
Ernie, yes.
Yeah, Ernie. Yeah, well,
I know he used to order some stuff, and he used to order some stuff.
I always got my seed from a seed house, which was Gurney's at the time, and then I moved on to seeds and such, because you can get a better pack for the size of garden that we have. Gurney's, they give you enough for a farm, and seeds and such, you give you a small pack. That's why I changed seed houses, but I usually get mine from the seed house, and I don't like getting. I grew most of my stuff from seeds, even though the tomatoes are hard, because the timing is bad, so I had to change up on them. But I still like the seed houses for the garlic and such.
All our windows in the houses had little pots, pans, no bottles with the tops cut off. And he had seeds for onions. Have you ever seen that?
Mm-hmm.
It's like blades of grass. It's
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
sprout. He did tomatoes. He did everything from seed and planted it. And it grew.
But it took me a long time to find out there were two kinds of onions, like
Onions.
short day, long day.
Yeah.
I've been buying the wrong ones and they didn't grow right. I didn't understand. And then, you know what happened? I read. I read the book.
Isn't that amazing?
It is
how, you know,
amazing.
You can educate yourself after a while. You just
Yeah,
have to
long
admit
day,
that you
short
don't
day.
know everything.
But something else. Do we have two master gardeners here?
Yes.
What made you go into
So,
that?
Master Gardeners.
Mhm.
Let's say something about the say something about the Master Gardener program and how has that influenced the way that you garden?
For me personally, the first time I got involved with PHS and met more people who garden, and that's when I first started hearing about a master gardening program. And so Beverly Gill took the program,
Delmer's wife.
Delmer's wife, and she took the program, I believe, with Blanche Epps, which is, Blanche Epps is one of those names,
Those
in the
legendary
legendary
gardeners.
names in the Philadelphia gardening world was Blanche Epps. And so I talked to both of them about being a master gardener, and they told me some things, but it wasn't clear to me. So I finally actually called the office and asked, okay, so how would I become a master gardener? And they told me there was classes you got to take, and there was a book that you got to buy, and that the classes met every Wednesday for 14 weeks at 1 o'clock. And so I said, so who that is working can afford to take off every Wednesday for 14 weeks from their job? So I mentioned that to them, and he said, well, most of the people who take the program, the gentleman I talked to on the phone said, most of the people who took the program were retired. And I said, oh, so what they told me when I asked Blanche and different people, it was the equivalent of 12 college credits. I'm a big education person. You say there's some education out there to be had, I'm on it. And so when I asked them, I said, so why is it held on the day? Why isn't it held in the evening? Why is it held on the weekend? And it was like, so after you're done this, you're expected to volunteer. And if you're working, you can't really volunteer. I said, oh, so this is a volunteer training program and not an educational program. And that's when it was kind of explained to me. So I was like, okay. So I'm looking to figure out, I'm still trying to figure out, how can I take this program? How can I take this program? And I remember putting something online about a master gardening program. And I can't say it was Facebook, but it was something similar to Facebook or something. And somebody said to me that Oregon State has a master gardening program that's online. And so I contacted Oregon State about their master gardening program that was online. And they said, yes, you can take the master gardening program online. It was more expensive to take it online, but I paid for the program. They mailed me the book. Everything that we were supposed to study showed up in my inbox at 12:01 on Sunday evening. We had to turn in our homework at no later than 12:01 on Friday evening, and we had video recorded lectures in the program. And I thought it was like, at that point too, I was also attending Chestnut Hill College, so it kind of fit in to that type of situation. And it was done on Blackboard. Like a lot of the classes I took at Chestnut Hill was done on Blackboard. But what I was surprised at is there were 75 people in my class. And out of those 75 people, only 41 of them were from Oregon. The rest of those people were from all across the country and all around the world. So we had a guy from Trinidad, somebody from Myanmar, from Georgia Republic, I was one of two people from Pennsylvania, a couple of people from New York, from the South. And so there was a vast amount of gardening experience that was exchanged through that program. It was probably, I would say, up there one of my best gardening experiences. But what the Master Gardening Program did for me is it put the science and the why behind a lot of things that I kind of sort of knew, but it explained why I did this. It let me know why my grandmother always had those jars of water with the eggshells in it that she used for watering her plants. It let me know why all the things that I've seen people do and that I continue to do, it gave you the why. You know, as opposed to, this is what because we do this. But why are we doing this? Because this is what we do. It explained it. It gave scientific explanation. All right, so Rags, what about you?
It's nothing like it. The Master Garden
So
Program.
you went through the Penn State Master Garden
Penn
program.
State Master Garden Program. It really opened my eyes to people, education, what you should and should not do, how to plant, what to plant, seasonal, what to put in to keep the soil right, what to plant in the soil, what different types of plants you have to rotate every year. I learned a lot in the Master Garden Program. And what that did for me, it helped me talk to my gardeners, explain to them about different garden procedures, what to plant and how to plant, and what to do and what not to do. I met a lot of gardeners that didn't know nothing about school. I got 2 gardeners in my garden that all they do is, they are sole gardeners from the South. And they can plant anything in the ground and know and tell you how to plant and when to plant it and when it's going to come up. And I'm not going to mention no names, but these guys helped me out a lot because they give me information naturally from what's going on in their mind and what I learned in school. And I put all that together, and it gave me a good outlook on how to deal with folks on a one-on-one level. But when they come to me about questions and answers, but I can always go to the computer. That's easy. But knowing it and telling them at the same time and explaining to them the difference is a big thing. It's a wonderful thing because they trust you and they think you're one of them because you're part of their natural thing, you know. And especially my volunteers. The volunteers that come in from all across the country, they come into this garden, come into Awbury Community Garden, they really take a lot out with them. I mean, they impress me because every time I turn around, they tell me, Mr. Ragsdale, are you coming to our party? Are you? No, I got things to do. I can't. You young folks, your party is your party. But I hate to say no to them because they want me to be there with them when they celebrate. But this year was beautiful. They all wanted me to come to their parties. I said, no, I couldn't do that. I had other things to do. And I was trying to make up a little excuses. I did. But, you know, sitting around with them, taking pictures and us, you know, their photographs, that's all they want. Come over here, get in there. Photographs. But to tell you what, the wonderful thing about gardening is getting young people into the garden. That really is enthusiastic thing to get young folks into work in the garden, to see them work around the garden, work in different plots, and help people out. That was basically my joy of just this whole summer. And the summer ain't over yet, but I think the volunteers is gone for the rest of the year. I'm pretty sure they are. I might have a couple coming in on Saturday, or on Friday, because I had 2 people that dances in on me on Friday and say, Mr. Ragsdale, can I come in Friday and work in the garden? I said, great. So that's my job.
I have been involved off and on with community gardening since the 70s. And one of the things that we like to say on the national level is community gardening is about 10% gardening and 90% community. And I think that everybody has touched on that in this circle, especially now, Mr. Ragsdale, because yes, it's easy to learn how to grow vegetables. It's a little harder to learn how to grow vegetables well, but what community gardens seem to grow much more than vegetables and much more than flowers is that they seem to grow community, and they seem to provide an opportunity for people to get to know each other on a positive level. You know, it's like we got vegetables. Who can say bad things about vegetables? You know, and it's like, okay, we have a non-crisis situation here. I mean, sometimes it gets us involved. We have a crisis situation, we gotta feed people, let's get some vegetables in the ground and let's get them out to the church. That's one thing. But mostly it gives us a nice level playing field where people of all races, all ages, all education levels, all of those things can interact on a level where they can all learn and they can all teach. So what I wanted to ask was, words would be good here. What makes you want to come to the garden as often as you do? Is it the plants? Is it the people? Is it the characters that you meet? Okay, let's change that around a little bit. What's your favorite part of being involved in a garden? In a community garden?
For me, I guess, truthfully speaking, I'm all about the plants. I am all there. That's the reason why I've joined as many gardening groups as I do, the Indoor Plant Society, Cactus Society, the Gesneria Society. I'm all about the plants. I'm all about learning about the plants. And there are things that are specific to houseplants, but there are things that are applicable to houseplants and to vegetables and to outside flowers. So for me, it's about the plants and it's about knowledge.
All right, so she just negated everything I said.
Yeah.
But for the good, because who can argue with that? So what's your favorite?
I'm trying to figure it out. I don't know.
We don't know.
You have to, what makes it worthwhile going?
See, but
It's the social part, right? The social part. I'm with Ragsdale.
A lot of my garden is in my own head while I'm there with no just thinking things, like while I walk.
Okay,
You know, when you
hold
do-
on a second until we get. Do you want to say that again?
Well, like it's just the time to think. You know, your garden, sometimes you got to think about that, but a lot of times I'm just out there and the world's going by and I'm happy.
Okay, so again, it's the plants and the solitude and the quiet and the.
I actually do talk to them, especially the peas.
Yeah.
They never
Truth
answer me, but I
confessions
talk to
there.
them.
You know what's funny though? Rag says that when he said it's all about the kids, I had to put my vote there.
I think that when you're in charge, you have a different perspective than you have as an actual member. When you're in charge, there's an attitude that you have to have as a garden club member, or as a plant club member, or as a garden club member. You're there for what you're there for. So, and I'm coming to the community garden to I'm checking on my tomatoes. Does anything need to be staked? I'm checking on this. I'm looking at that. Is there a problem with this, that, and the other? And I'm trying to get in and get out to a certain degree because there are other things in the day that I have to do. I'm trying to get there when it's cool to be there as possible, and then I want to get back home and get under the air. When you're an officer, you're there doing that, but you in your mind also is, I need to speak to so-and-so, I need to check on so-and-so, I need to remind so-and-so, and that's kind of different from being a club member. Granted, if I'm there and somebody asks me a question and I'm not an officer, I can answer a question, or I might talk to somebody, or it might be somebody I haven't seen in a while. But those are nice situations that happen, but I'm there for doing whatever I have to do as gardening. When you're an officer, there is your gardening aspect, but then there is the running of the club that really takes a social network type of thing.
My thing is, I just like to see anything grow. Right now, on my windowsill, it's a beautiful plant. It's the seeds that I scraped out of a lemon. I will plant anything. In anything. His father laughed at me. I wanted to do origami, and I had him dig up a tree for me. Well, it's like, what is she going to do with that tree? I don't care what it is. I want to see it grow. So I will plant anything.
But when she got started with the garden is when we went up to my dad's house and I was digging worms to go fishing, and he said, boy, I'm his son, so he could call me that. He made me dig enough for him to plant. Because I could, so.
And while you're digging, you might as well.
And she saw this stuff growing, and that was that. I mean, when she saw this stuff growing in the garden, we had to have one in Philly.
From Flemington, New Jersey.
I mean, when I was a kid in Jersey, the Garden State, I can remember when the horses used to plow my dad's plot. And
fertilize it while they were at it.
They certainly did, and we laughed. But we had to go out and pick those beans and those peas and harvest all that stuff. I hated it, but it was good. I mean, that's the only food we had, You grew it pretty much. I mean, it wasn't a giant garden, but there was plenty enough there to keep you busy. And when she saw that stuff growing, that was that. We come back and went up the street and got
anything you give me, I want to grow. I want to see.
And my father would be laughing.
So far it's watching things grow, making things grow,
And
appreciating the things that are growing. What about you? What makes it worth your while to go to the garden?
You said as people move up in different positions, right? At the first position, they are beginning to study, and then second, third, and fourth position. Each position dictates what you should and should not do. You might want to be you be a laborer until you move up into another rank. It's just like to me, it's just like the military. You start off as a beginner. You do all beginner's work. You wash dishes, you scrub floors and all that. And then you move up to another rank and you move into a dictator, sort of like. You learn how to, talk to people and say, you do this and you that. But it seems like, it puts you in a position that you have to change. But you still love what you're doing, but you have to change in a way to make everybody happy, to keep everybody, on the right frame of mind. And I think it's
a lot of personal growth.
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
And you have to realize that people move in different stages in life, and you have to work with. And that's how I say, working with people, you have to learn how to work with folks, because that's how you get your unit together, and that's how you get your people together, and that's how you work together. I'm speaking basically from my learning in the military, and that's how we work. We work like that with folks. And what you do with a beginner, that same beginner is going to be the person that's going to run the whole troop one day. Mm-hmm. So you have to teach him well. And that's the way I look at things. I take things on a scale like this. I say, well, I got a group of folks coming in here, and I'm gonna treat them just like gold. And I'm gonna treat them like they're the number one things in the world. And then when I get them in there and show them what I want them to do, I get down with them I get down with them and do the same thing they do. I push a wheelbarrow, dig a shovel, I throw some chips. I'll do everything. I move from one group to another. I have them situated all over the garden. I move from one group to another and assist them in doing what they have to do. I got two kids tying up blueberry bushes on the side of the fence all the way around. And I walk down there and look at them, and they're down there either talking on the phone or or with the string in their hand, the scissors in their hand, getting ready to, doing a few things. I get there and I get with them and I get the string in my hand and I start tying them up, I don't say nothing to them. But you know what? They watch me and they jump right on it. They start tying them up. I was stringing them up into the fence, and this is an example I'm going to show. And they started and they didn't stop. They kept right on going all the way around the fence area, tying up the blueberry bushes. That's what I wanted them to do. I had two kids on this side and two on the other side. And that's what the two on the other side was doing what they're supposed to do, but the two on this side, I noticed that they were just, hello. So I just got with them. I didn't say nothing to them about talking on the phone. I just got with them and got the string and started working. And you know what? They took the scissors out of my hand and took the string and they went to town.
Yeah.
That's how I do my thing with my volunteers. That's how people work, basically. And that's the only way I can deal with it. And that's the only way I felt that my learning, what I learned over the years, I use that as my prop to get things going.
Was it Ernie who used to put the fish heads in his garden plot every year? Oh, it was you. It was you. Okay, for some reason I thought it was Ernie.
See, it started out a bait story.
He did it. He gave it the fish.
Ernie, we used to go fishing all the time. And it was great, except the animals would dig up the fish head and there goes your tomato or whatever you had planted for. I just
You didn't have cats come in and dig them up?
It was the fox
Oh, yeah.
and the raccoons.
Yeah.
I have a question that's going to take you all the way back to the beginning. Who petitioned to have that garden in the first place? Did our neighborhood do it, or did Penn State do it?
I think initially too, that area was a Victory Garden. It was part of the Victory Gardens that happened after World War I and World War II.
Right there in that spot?
In that same area, and then I think after the war was over, I don't think people gardened there in the community as much, because I worked with a woman who used to live in this area, whose mom community gardened here. Her mom was from Ireland. Her mom community garden here, where it was Victory Garden, and she gardened here before Washington Lane you were able to cut through. So before it was a street from Chew to Ardleigh, when there was no street there, and she lived in this area.
So there was a garden there before, and the person that we know was foremost in it, of course he passed away, was like a Mrs. Davenport.
I've heard her name before.
Melba Davenport.
I've heard that name.
I think there's a
And
mark right there for
I
her.
wondered if she petitioned, if she was the one to petition.
If Penn State got involved in it, it was because the neighborhood
The
petitioned.
neighborhood started.
Yeah, there's a marker up there for it somewhere, by the gate or something.
For Melba, yeah. Okay.
And there was a marker for somebody else there too, wasn't there? There was two markers. Initially, I remember when I became a member, there were two markers. And there were those trees that Dilmer got that were Franklinian trees. Franklinia, he had those planted out there too. I don't know if they're still here or not. But the markers and the trees were planted on the outside of the garden. I haven't looked to see.
So that makes this one of, I believe, only 3 or 4 gardens. I didn't realize that this was a Victory Garden earlier, that are still existent.
Mhm.
So, wow, that's one more little piece of important, Awbury being important. So, and sometimes when we do these interviews, people like to talk about the characters that influenced them. Like the Ernies of the garden and the Delmer Gills of the garden. Is there anybody in particular that you remember because they inspired you or because you just had to do something in spite of them? That was one story that one of my gardeners has told. It's like, oh, he always had the answer and I always had to prove him wrong, and that's how I learned to do more about gardening. Is there anybody in particular that you guys would like to elevate to the status of character of the garden?
Yes,
We can put her Ernie.
of course. This lady right here.
Oh.
Yes.
I was a short window, but I would say for me, it was probably Delmer. It's probably Delmer and Beverly. It's hard to separate Delmer from Beverly because
You can't.
they were such a
They were
unit.
such a unit.
But it was probably Delmer and Beverly because towards the tail end of the master plan, we hardly had. That was the tail end of our hand-holding with Penn State. They didn't seem to have the funds. They didn't seem to have, we had a garden advisor, and then maybe a year or 2 after the garden was redone, we had no garden advisor, okay? And it was Delmer and Beverly's interaction with PHS. They got me involved with PHS. They got the garden involved with PHS. When we first moved into that area, and Rick and his wife will attest to the fact that the fence wasn't totally enclosed. We had the fence at where the gate and the door was.
Yeah.
Towards the back wasn't fenced in, towards the side wasn't fenced in. And Delmer approached PHS for the monies for the turkey wire that enclosed the rest of the garden. The posts were there, but the fencing wasn't there. It was Delmer's outreach to PHS. They got the garden involved with PHS that led to everything that happened from the garden judging contest to the city harvest to some of the other things that the garden was able to do. A lot of the volunteers is the PHS coordinator. So I would say without the involvement of PHS, of Beverly and Delmer,
I have to throw in a little piece of Delmer. He was a chef. In fact, he was the chef. He still is a chef. And he was at one time the chef at the catering service of the Franklin Institute. And he was the one that taught us, if you cook it, they will come. And it was like, he said, if you build it, they will come is a bad idea. He said, everybody has to be involved in the building so that they appreciate the stuff that you're building. You don't just build it and say, come on, come on, come on, because they don't appreciate it. But he said, if you cook it, they'll come. And he said, the more people experience the taste of the different foods, the more they will get involved in growing different foods than the same things over and over and over again. So I will always appreciate the Gills for their really pushing of the nutrition side of the gardening.
My hero would be whoever came up with the watering system with the hoses.
that was part of the master plan.
That's like sliced
Mhm.
bread.
Why didn't that change your lives?
Yeah.
That came out with the master plan,
Yeah.
the watering
Watering.
into
With
the
the
garden.
hoses at the
Mhm.
different
Mhm.
stations.
Yeah, the old days of hauling all of the hoses from that hydrant out there.
Yeah, well, there were hoses that they connected that you were able to fill all the barrels. But the thing is there are things that you learn horticultural wise as time goes on. Those open air barrels tend to breed mosquitoes, and now that's something that you really don't want to do. But back in the day, that's what almost everybody did in regards to gardening, is that they had
Remember we used to put screens over them?
the screens.
Never worked, and people would never put them back on.
The screens never really worked.
Our barrels didn't stay full of water long enough for mosquitoes to hatch.
Yeah, it depended on where you were in the garden, and when the water barrels were filled, sometimes you would be down into the barrel trying to get
Your feet up.
trying to get the water out of the barrel. The other thing that I would say is when we got involved with the City Harvest Program, there were the cooking classes that went along with the City Harvest Program, and they stopped doing those. And I thought that they were not only beneficial to the people who were receiving the food, they were also beneficial to the community gardeners growing the food, because we used to have at least 1 or 2 cooking classes a year. And I remember that was the first time that somebody showed me how to make a chocolate beet cake, and you think that chocolate and beet wouldn't go together, but the moisture from the beet alleviates having to put oil in there, and you have a really moist, dark cake. And so there was a lot of people, when they were starting to give out the food, one of the things that they realized is a whole lot of people, especially in this day and age, people are used to going to the market and buying the carrots and the mirepoix or whatever already sliced, and didn't know how to prepare unprocessed vegetables. That really showed people, how to process vegetables, especially a lot of younger people. I mean, I grew up at a point where, you shell peas on the porch into a bowl. You tip and tail the string beans. But a whole lot of people don't have that experience, and the fact that those classes are missing, it means that when you give somebody raw vegetables from the garden, there's a good chance that they don't know what to do with them.
Yeah, and also the learning to cook new and strange vegetables extends your gardening season, because who knew that if you cooked pea tendrils, they taste like peas? But you could be picking them a month before you're picking the peas. So that means you've got green vegetables out of the garden at a much earlier time than you would ever expect to be eating out of your garden. Yeah, that is a piece that it was the Health Promotion Council, and they lost the funding for that, so they've not been able to keep that up. So,
Which reminds me, I've got a bag full of beet leaves. What should I do with it?
I have to send you that beet cake recipe, chocolate beet cake recipe.
Really?
It was,
Okay.
the person made it. So if they hadn't made it and I hadn't gotten a chance to try it, I might not have ever tried it. But they actually made it, and you actually tasted it, and it was pretty good. And then they did a sweet potato
remember the
chili.
impossible pie that they made from the flying saucer squashes?
That I don't remember. Like I said, I remember
It was a
the
dessert.
sweet potato chili.
Oh.
Yeah. Who would have thought about putting sweet potatoes in the chili? That was pretty good too. You? Yeah.
By the way, Mr. Quiet in the corner here, I'm just in charge of the equipment, is the gardener himself. So
Yes, that's me, Joe Makuc, quiet in the corner.
quiet in the corner.
I guess we need to wrap this up a little bit.
So, does anybody have anything that they really, really want to, now's your chance, that you really want to say about your worst day in the garden? Or your best day in the garden?
The worst worst day in the garden.
There were no worst days in the garden. were there?
No,
The
there's
worst,
no
the
bad.
worst day in the garden beats the worst, is better than the best day at the job.
Oh, I want to quote you. Oh my goodness. The worst day in the garden is still better than the best day at the job. I think there's no better way to end that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good, good.
So I think we're going to wrap up our discussion from Awbury Arboretum's Community Garden. You guys are awesome. This was so much fun.